So I think this kind of sets us up for a little bit of touching on this point. Rory, I know you mentioned measurement, and I know ultimately you've had this view that the role of learning and development is really something that you should be measuring yourself on whether or not the business is doing well.
Yeah. We're always looking to measure the success of our learning and our training against the goals of the business, right? I think, there are some times where you have to look at attendance and course completion, and those are great measurements of success. But ultimately, are you moving the needle on the goals of the business? Sure, you had 100% attendance for this kind of training, but are people doing what you set out to do? And a lot of that really has to stem from the objectives that you set when developing the training. Are you using the word understand a lot in your objectives? And if you are, stop doing that, right? How do you measure that? How do you measure understanding? I mean, it's very, very difficult. So you have to find other ways to measure success. Are people applying knowledge? Are they explaining things to customers? Are they developing new products for us as a company? Those are measurements. And then you can kind of backfill. Learning and training will never, in my opinion, be directly correlated to success, but you can kind of look at it as potential causation, right? Like, we helped to influence the sales team increase their sales this quarter, or we had less attrition in this particular division that usually has a high level of attrition. We saw a lot of managers went to more training last quarter. We can make the case to say the training that we launched to this side of the business helped have an effect on higher sales, less attrition, lower attrition, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think this kind of touches on the important point of learning, and really also like developing a culture of learning is answering that question, like, well, how would you measure the pros and cons of a culture, right? It's very difficult question to answer, because again, that can be often a demand from senior leadership or people who might not completely and fully understand what learning and development does. Nathan, any thoughts or builds on measuring the impact of social learning strategies or tactics?
Yeah, well, I think that measurement and tying learning to outcomes is kind of always the hard part, right? Everyone's been talking about this in learning and development forever. Can you actually tie to business outcomes? And to the example that Rory was giving earlier, if you do a learning program for a sales team, sales go up. Well, was that the learning and development program, or was that the new tool that we just bought that kind of helps us find more data about our prospects? So that's hard. I think that as a prerequisite, you must look at the leading indicators. For example, the 3 formats that I mentioned earlier: workshops, lunch and learns, groups, and one-on-ones. It's really about the amount of information exchanged. So how many sessions are happening? That's kind of your leading indicator. It's similar to attendance for other things. But with social learning, and again, to Rory's point earlier, it's something that you want to be happening over time naturally, where you are not necessarily the organizer of every single lunch and learn and workshop and one-on-one, that the culture starts to pick that up. And so to me, the key thing is not just the absolute number of sessions that are happening, but recurrence. Are you consistently seeing that you launched the mentorship program, but then month 12, you are still having as many sessions as you were having in month 6? That to me is the stickiness of the program itself. And, I don't think people that are super busy are going to continue having lunch and learns and one-on-one sessions if they're not useful to them. So to me, I acknowledge all the challenges with measuring in the business outcomes. I think to me, you still have to look at the leading indicators. And the most important thing with those leading indicators is to actually measure the stickiness of that over time, even when you're a little bit more hands-off.